There's a quiet kind of pain that deep thinkers carry. It doesn't scream. It doesn't ask for attention. It just lingers silently like an invisible weight pressing on the soul. It's the pain of noticing too much, of hearing what wasn't said, of feeling what others refuse to feel. You might be at a dinner table. The conversation is light, full of laughter and meaningless chatter. Someone talks about the weather. Another shares the latest gossip. Everyone nods, smiles, plays along. But then you speak, and suddenly the room changes. You say something real, something honest, something that doesn't fit into the surface-level rhythm they've created. And it doesn't land. No one laughs. No one responds. They shift in their seats. Someone clears their throat. Another says, "Anyway." The moment is gone, but you felt it. That small rejection, that unspoken discomfort, it happens more often than you care to admit. Carl Jung understood this perfectly. He believed that the deeper you go into your own mind, the more alienated you become from the world around you. Not because you're broken, but because the world prefers illusion. It rewards those who conform, who blend in, who nod without questioning, who pretend to be okay, even when everything inside them is falling apart. But deep thinkers, they're the ones who don't pretend. They can't because they see through things, fake smiles, empty traditions, and hollow systems. Jung once said, "The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the general unconsciousness of society." That's not a compliment, it's a warning. Because in a society that doesn't value depth, being self-aware is not a superpower. It's a curse, and that curse starts early. From childhood, most deep thinkers are misunderstood. They ask questions other kids don't. They wonder why grown-ups lie, why rules are arbitrary, why love sometimes feels conditional. And instead of answers, they're told, "Don't ask too much, just do as you're told. Why can't you be like the other kids?" So they learn to stay quiet. But inside, the questions never stop. They just grow sharper, heavier. By the time they become adults, they've built entire worlds inside their minds. Worlds filled with unspoken thoughts, unseen truths, and unexplored feelings. But the external world doesn't welcome that. At work, they're told to follow scripts. In relationships, they're told they're too intense. On social media, they're told to just be positive, and so they hide. Again, not because they want to, but because they've learned what happens when they don't. When you express a complex idea, people think you're showing off. When you sit in silence, they think you're judging them. When you talk about trauma, they think you're being dramatic. When you ask questions, they say you're overthinking. But you're not overthinking. You're seeing clearly. You're observing what others miss, and you're feeling what others are afraid to feel. And that makes people uncomfortable, not because you're wrong, but because you're right. You speak truths that others spend their whole lives avoiding. You bring light to shadows they've kept buried. You remind them that something is missing, and that reminder is painful. That's why deep thinkers are often met with resistance, mockery, or distance. Not because of who they are, but because of what they represent. A mirror. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow. And most people don't want to meet their shadow. So they reject the person who reflects it. That person is often you. Have you ever tried to warn someone? To tell them a hard truth before it was too late? To help them see a pattern that was destroying them? And instead of gratitude, you got silence or anger, or ghosted completely. You weren't being negative, you were being real. But real is dangerous. Real doesn't sell. Real doesn't entertain. Real makes people think. And thinking hurts. Jung said that most people don't think. They just rearrange their prejudices. They repeat what they've heard. They defend what they've been taught. They perform. But deep thinkers, they question. They deconstruct. They reconstruct. They stay up at night wrestling with contradictions. They don't seek approval, they seek understanding. And in doing so, they often lose the approval of those who live on the surface. That's the tragedy of awareness. The more you awaken, the more isolated you become. Not because you're broken, but because everyone else is asleep. This is why many deep thinkers feel lonely even in a crowd. It's not the absence of people, it's the absence of connection. You could be surrounded by friends, colleagues, even family, yet still feel like a stranger. Because what you crave is not company, but communion, not chatter, but conversation, not distraction, but depth. And in a shallow culture, that depth is rare. It's easier to talk about TV shows, sports, or fashion than it is to talk about death, meaning, love, and suffering. But those are the things that haunt you. Those are the things you can't ignore. And so, you play along, you laugh at jokes, you nod at cliches, you smile at small talk. But inside, you're starving. Starving for someone who sees, who asks, who wonders like you do. Sometimes you find them. Another deep soul, another restless mind. And the conversation flows like water. Hours feel like minutes. You talk about the universe, about childhood scars, about dreams and fears you never dared to say aloud. And in that moment, you feel alive. You feel seen. You feel understood. But such moments are rare. They're fragile, fleeting. The world doesn't make much space for them. So, most of the time, you live in between silence and longing, between observation and expression, between the inner world and the outer facade. And that in-between is heavy. It wears you down. Jung believed that suffering is not an obstacle to life, but the very path to it. He said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Deep thinkers know this well. They suffer not because they want to, but because they must. Because every insight costs something. Every truth carries a price. You lose illusions. You lose comfort. You lose belonging. But in that loss, you gain clarity. You gain authenticity. You gain a connection to something larger than yourself. And maybe that's the paradox. The more isolated you feel from the world, the more connected you become to life itself. Still, the pain is real. The nights of overthinking. The conversations replayed 1,000 times. The journal pages filled with questions that never end. The ache of being too much for some and not enough for others. The quiet grief of knowing that most people will never truly know you, not because you're hiding, but because they're not looking. And so, you carry this invisible burden. You carry it with grace when you can. You carry it with tears when you can't. But you carry it because there's no other choice. But maybe, just maybe, that burden is also a gift. Because while others chase distractions, you search for meaning. While others settle for illusions, you seek truth. While others numb their pain, you transform yours into wisdom. And yes, it's lonely. And yes, it's heavy. But it's also beautiful. Because to feel deeply is to live deeply. To question is to awaken. To suffer is to grow. And though the world may never fully understand you, that doesn't mean your depth is wasted. It means your role is different. You're not here to fit in. You're here to see, to feel, to remind others that there's more to life than surfaces. And that, perhaps, is the quiet purpose of deep thinkers. To carry the weight of awareness so that one day, when the world is ready, someone else can awaken too. In the end, being a deep thinker is not a weakness, but a calling. It is a path that often feels lonely, but it carries within it the power to bring light where others only see shadows. The world may misunderstand you, it may reject your truth, and it may label you as too much. But remember, depth is not meant to please the crowd. It is meant to awaken the soul. And if even one person feels seen, healed, or inspired because of your truth, then your journey has already made the world a better place. So, If these words touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay connected. Because together we create a space where depth is celebrated, not silenced.